That day, for the first time, I became a woman. A sensation that I had never felt from my husband awakened. And it was so strange to be able to feel this way. When we were alone, I asked my son-in-law to call me by my name. Like and subscribe, please. Come quickly and eat. I always call my son-in-law in a pleasant voice. I have many wrinkles and sagging skin on my face, but I try to look pretty as a woman. It might seem absurd, but I want to do that. I am over the age of 60. I am a university professor, and I don't have much time left to stand on the podium. I have a daughter who has gone abroad for her study, and I live with my son-in-law. My husband has been gone for over 5 years. My husband was a very weak person, so he didn't come to my room at night a few times a year. I didn't have any complaints because I didn't have any desire for my husband. My husband and I used separate rooms. For 10 years before my husband went to heaven, he never came to my room at night. But I had no complaints. I just thought everyone lived like that. My son-in-law is handsome and has a good figure. He is tall and muscular. He is a good student and writes several papers a year. But I don't know how he finds time to exercise. I've known my son-in-law since he was young. He is the son of my colleague and friend. So my daughter and son-in-law saw each other from time to time from an early age, and they continued to meet as adults and eventually got married. My son-in-law is a person who treats my strong-willed daughter very kindly. I don't know if I taught my daughter wrong, but sometimes she was rude to her son-in-law. But my son-in-law never frowned at his wife. We live in a spacious two-story house, where I lived with my husband, with my daughter and son-in-law, living on the first floor, and we lived on the second floor. When my daughter got married and started living on the first floor, we made a separate entrance on the second floor. It was to respect the privacy of my daughter's family. After our daughter went abroad to study, my son-in-law and I lived in the same house but on different floors, which allowed us to maintain our privacy. A few months ago, something happened that shook our peaceful routine. I had finished lecturing at the school and was in the middle of grading student papers in my office when an old high school friend called me. We'd occasionally see each other at reunions, but since I'd turned 50, I hadn't been able to attend as often. So it had been nearly 10 years since we last met. This friend owned a restaurant not too far from our house. They invited me for dinner, and I accepted. As we were dining and catching up, my friend hesitantly brought up a shocking piece of news. They believed that my son-in-law was having an affair. According to them, they had seen my son-in-law entering a motel next to their restaurant with another woman. A motel? I asked, perplexed. My friend then confirmed what they had seen my son-in-law entering the motel in the afternoon with a woman and not leaving until the evening. My heart sank, but I tried to remain calm. I asked my friend to keep this conversation a secret, and they reassured me, I met up with you to keep it a secret. Don't you understand? I felt relieved. Returning home, I was in a daze for a while. Could my son-in-law, who was so kind and caring to my daughter, be unfaithful? But, given his young age and the fact that he's been living apart from his wife, perhaps he couldn't contain his vigor. These thoughts crossed my mind, and I also hoped that my friend was mistaken. As time went on, my feelings grew more complex. I was furious at the thought of him with another woman, scared that someone else would find out. And at times I couldn't help but feel flushed as the image of his muscular physique came to mind. A few days later, I visited my friend's restaurant. Since they were close with the owner of the motel in question, I explained the situation to the motel owner and gained entry. To my surprise, there were more rooms than I had anticipated. The owner mentioned that they had a lot of guests during the day. I double-checked with my friend to make sure it was indeed my son-in-law. They saw, and their response, "How could I not recognize your handsome son-in-law?" sent shivers down my spine again. My friend even offered to ask the motel owner to help me catch my son-in-law in the act of infidelity. The motel owner agreed and said they would check the CCTV footage for me, so I went home. A week later, the motel owner called me. I rushed to the motel and saw the footage of my son-in-law entering with a middle-aged woman. My hands shook, unsure of what to do next. That evening, I sat down for dinner with my son-in-law, who was as handsome as a movie star, and I studied his face intently. He seemed uncomfortable under my gaze. I asked him directly if he had ever been to that motel. He was visibly startled and unable to respond. "It's all right. You can tell me," I encouraged. He nodded in admission, though I trembled with a sense of betrayal. I maintained my composure and said, "The woman you entered the motel with looked to be of considerable age." My son-in-law hung his head. I told him that I needed time to think and said nothing more, waiting. After a long pause, he lifted his head and shared something astonishing. He confessed to having a fantasy about older women, as old as his mother, since he was young, and the most beautiful of his mother's friends had always been me. He even suggested that this might be why he married my daughter. I was stunned. Then he revealed more. He had met a middle-aged woman who resembled me, and they had been visiting the motel together. I apologized to my son-in-law. Words of remorse spilled out without thought. I told him I understood that such thoughts could be overwhelming during the prime of his life. He then made a surprising proposal. If he ceased seeing that woman, could I become his lover? I was so embarrassed I felt my face flush. "You've been lonely too, haven't you?" he said. Tears fell without my consent. Yes, I had been lonely. Throughout my marriage, I rarely felt loved by my husband as a woman. I had lived as a wife, a mother, a professor. That was the entirety of my life. I had never really felt loved as a woman, and had convinced myself that it wasn't important in life. He told me, "If it's the right path for both of us, it doesn't matter if others are unaware." Then my son-in-law took my hands as I wept. I lifted my head to meet his eyes and nodded. Holding his hand, I led him to my room. We made love. It wasn't until dawn that my son-in-law let me go. Catching my breath, I told my son-in-law that he must stop seeing her. He nodded as if it was obvious. He suggested that until his wife returned, we should continue as lovers. I nodded too. When I mentioned feeling too old, he assured me, "You are the woman of my fantasies," thanking me profoundly. That night, I truly became a woman. I awakened to sensations I had never felt with my husband, and the newness of these feelings was astonishing. I asked my son-in-law to call me by my first name when we were alone, but he refused. He insisted on calling me Mom and wanted me to call him Son. Although it was strange, I nodded without words. "Son, will you make Mom happy today?" I had asked this of my son-in-law, and he said it filled him with joy. He professed his love for me, saying I was precious. At home, he stuck by my side, even following me to the bathroom and watching over me as I showered. Initially, I was embarrassed, but I grew accustomed to it, and that embarrassment turned into a different kind of excitement. We lived like a young couple. Embarrassing as it was, I did everything my son-in-law asked. He found my shyness endearing. Sometimes I wondered, what am I doing at this age? But I tried to push those thoughts aside. Once, I asked what would happen when my daughter returned. I was trembling, scared that he might want to end our relationship, but he said he wished to maintain it forever. I am incredibly happy, though I feel sorry for my daughter. I rationalized that I prevented her family from breaking apart due to my son-in-law's potential infidelity. Society might condemn us if they knew, burying us in scandal. Yet, it seems neither of us can stop.